Hi, so it's been a while since I've done one of these discussions, but we're back I guess. Feels really good to be honest to see that TOG notification pop up again. But anyways, I guess let's just dive right into this, because there's a shit ton of content to cover, especially in that first chapter. I guess the first thing I'll highlight is the most obvious detail, in that SAO has officially started Season 3. There's been speculation about whether he would move on from Season 2, considering his unsureness in the blog posts, but I'm kinda glad he did. I do get why SAO was hesitant, because it doesn't feel like a huge departure, unlike say the transition from Season 1 to Season 2. But even if it is a more superficial form of progression, sticking with Season 2 would have pissed off a lot of fans who are waiting for a different change of pace. So overall, I'm glad he decided to go through with this decision. I think one thing that stood out in Chapter 1 was the real sense that SAO was trying to tie up loose character and plot threads that we thought he'd abandoned or forgot about. Stuff like Horyang's coma or Traveler's complete lack of relevance in Rachel's group actually were properly touched upon for the first time in hundreds of chapters. And it was pretty immediate too, giving me the feeling that SAO has wanted to do something with these characters for a long ass time, but couldn't find the right time to insert these details. The latter in particular has always bugged me because he randomly appears in the workshop battle arc, and you think he's just some minor arc-centric character that will disappear after the arc finishes, and then he just kinda stays around in the background. SAO could have easily written him off, but he didn't, which led me to the assumption that he must be important in the long game. So yeah, I can safely say I'm freaking relieved that everyone isn't ignoring him anymore, even if he's still just getting tossed around from enemy to enemy. Horyang waking up on the other hand interests me because, if I'm remembering right, Kasano wasn't exactly buddy-buddies with him, and he escaped from Wagner, so why come back and save Horyang? Yes, they were both implanted with the devil fluid, so they shared that camaraderie of course, but they definitely weren't best friends. And Kasano's allegiance with Fug makes the whole idea that he would protect Horyang really strange. I'm also not sure if I'm on board with SAO undoing the coma through a time skip interaction, because it's a fairly important moment that I would have enjoyed seeing playing out with the Sweet and Sour team. But oh well, I guess. Maybe we'll get a flashback, maybe we won't. I gotta be honest, I get a kick out of SAO naming the Save Kun team the Shibusu team, because the poor dude is so unappreciated in the TOG fandom. Hell, I'd say maybe even more than Evan, which is pretty ironic considering they've both teamed up to scour the 49th floor for 2 years to find WOON. So they finally find the hideout thanks to Evan's multilingual skills, and what I find interesting about this is that Evan isn't using his pocket to pick up on the language these pterodactyl riders are speaking. To me, this means that there are languages that potentially the pocket communication system is either unaware of, or is unable to effectively translate. We know that pockets are manufactured by the workshop, but clearly their influence does not spread to all corners of each floor, in the same way that Miyapachan village was out of the floor ruler's range. I think this comes down to the fact that SAO has stated that each floor can be up to the size of an Earth continent, meaning that there is a vast expanse of unchecked land where factions, villages, or clans can hide out, develop their own culture, language, and understanding of the world. He could have easily assembled the tower in a way that the only inhabitants are regular contestants and those that enforce the rules or the games of the tower. So I really like that by including these unknowns into each floor setting, SAO is casually expanding upon the limitations of organizational authoritarian influence and how life can flourish in the absence of overseers. So we go back to Madaroko deliberating over whether to double-cross the regulars he's allowed on board, since he doesn't know about the Fug Slayers yet. I already thought this might happen because he's super slimy and feels more like a remnant of earlier TOG content where every player was out to portray someone else. But in that vein, I love the way that SAU demonstrated that Karaka senses the palpable distrust present in him by casually just pouring out his cup of tea in front of Madaroko. It's this kind of humour that makes Karaka so endearing to me because it's a blink and you'll miss it moment, especially when the dialogue covers up most of the panel. Same with the little joke about using the soul-stirring ladle for ramen. Honestly, it's always the little details that make me enjoy a chapter more, so Karaka's blank, subtle humour is something I just like to bring up in discussions a lot, even if they really aren't particularly crucial. It's just kind of fun to talk about them. We also get a reference to Madaroko's slayer god, Pfeffermore Seto, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of, but I don't think they've been mentioned before. That makes 3 Thug Slayers we haven't met yet, including Baylord Yama and Amort. Though considering Amort's supposed ties to Baylord Yama's rise up the tower, I imagine they'll soon both appear in the upcoming Bayroad arc. And I guess speaking of Yama, Karaka wants to trade the soul-stirring ladle for his training on how to defeat Caliban, which says a lot about Karaka's affection for his master. He doesn't explicitly say it, but I have a feeling that Karaka is secretly infuriated and saddened by his inability to defend his master, considering that, like BAAM, he doesn't know Ginseng is still alive. It seems fairly clear from EURASIA's prodding last season that there's some potential lingering emotion for Ginseng, so it was nice to semi-confirm that suspicion. Though Madaroko doesn't seem too fond of dealing with Baylord Yama for obvious reasons, so I doubt this deal will go down smoothly. I could definitely see Madaroko selling out the regulars and possibly even White and Karaka in an effort to establish stronger ties with a powerful slayer like Yama. And then picking up on another random thread, SAU reintroduces Rachel's Thug companions from Season 2 Part 1. Now I honestly can't remember their names, but I'll just call them Creepy Smiling Dude and Ugly Okama Lookalike or something. Cause I really don't care for their shenanigans since they facilitated the stabbing of Dan's legs and just disappeared randomly. But I have a minor speculation about the secret weapon they've brought along to Madaroko's warship. In the spirit of reintroducing characters from hundreds of chapters prior, I realised this could either be 2 people under that brown cloak. The first option would have been Kasano had he not appeared with Horiang in this chapter, but the second option, however, is that this massive guy could actually be Akryung. If you don't know who he is, I don't blame you, because he was only relevant during Season 1, but he is the purple coloured cleaver-wielding regular that accompanied Rachel in the Floor of Tests, and eviscerated Rack in the spear-bearing contest. He didn't assign him to allow Rachel to fulfill her deal, and is considered to be a devil in terms of pure strength. So I dig this idea because it would allow Rack to re-obtain that rivalry thread SAU dropped early on in Season 1, reaffirm Hiden's conniving influence in the shadows of Thug, and sort of provide another unknown variable into Rachel's plotline. And I guess I mainly speculate this based on the established ties with Thug, the weird growling sound that he emitted, and the fact that they were supposed to meet up with Rachel again before she was captured by Gastang. It all seems to fit neatly together somewhat, so hopefully we might see that character again, because I'd really love to know what was up with that big ass dude. Next, SAU finally decides to remove SACHI and BORO from the plotline, sort of signifying the departure from Season 2's long Hell Train saga. I didn't really see much more they could do in the group, to be honest, and they're already becoming pretty stale characters after the De La Show arc, not being incorporated enough into each arc thereafter, so this was the right move in my opinion. I do wonder if we'll see them again soon, but I don't think it's very likely. As I'll talk about with the second chapter, many regulars choose not to pursue ranker status and settle down in one of the floors instead, which is what SACHI and BORO will probably do. I think what's most surprising about the ship's departure was that BORO and the EURASIA family duo also boarded the ship for some reason. I'm not sure where they are going, but I'm intrigued by the potential for this minor thread. Like, I could totally see SAU just off-screening them until they come back, like in the Hidden Floor, but they've got Drac with them for some bizarre reason. I seriously don't know what I expected out of his character anymore, but catching a ride with the regulars was definitely not it. I guess here's hoping we might see the Fonseca family leaders and their floating castle or fortress or whatever they have. But I've also kind of determined that the Fonseca family are like a bunch of goofballs because of their color-coded blankets that I didn't notice they even had till now. I think Loria's also got one, but I just hadn't noticed until this point. It's the most random detail to incorporate in the story, but SAU loves that kind of stuff. I'm not going to harp on this too long, but SAU was putting a bunch of TOG fans in their place with BAAM and EVANKHEL'S chat. She asserts something that I've been saying for a while, and that is sure BAAM has OP skills like the Black March and the Thorns, but what he doesn't have is the fundamentals. Rankers whooped his ass when he didn't use his broken abilities, because his basics are trash, and high rankers like EVANKHELL and Yuri can immediately recognize the difference. We got so stuck in this whole ranker debate nonsense during the floor station that we forgot that BAAM's base power level is likely not even as strong as regulars like Endorsi, going by Edwan's comments during the Orb training. His OP abilities are stamina draining, so if a high ranker can withstand his onslaught, he'll have to return to base form and then proceed to get beat into a pulp. That's the key problem with BAAM's skill level currently, and I'm glad that EVANKHELL understands this. Lastly, I think the most amusing part of this chapter for me was the confirmation that Levy is a low tier buffoon that the rest of his crew make fun of. It always seems to me that SE was making fun of this moronic underestimation of BAAM's group, but I wasn't entirely sure if that was the intention. But yep, apparently SE was blatantly calling Levy mid, with the introduction of his captain and another subordinate, as they were supposedly finishing off Yua. Okay, so to get this out of the way, there's no chance she's dead. Not only did they refer to a bargaining chip, but we've also been faked out with her death before in the name hunt station. If SAU killed her off this carelessly, then it would be kind of insulting to her character now. But yeah, getting back to those new characters. I'm not a fan of Discount White because I can just tell he's fodder, but the captain on the other hand actually has a pretty neat cybernetic bodysuit aesthetic. The only thing I'm majorly curious about is what's up with the face mask. I thought it might be a breathing apparatus at first, but looking at it again, that's probably not true. Maybe just a style choice by SAU to match the enhanced cybernetic look? I genuinely don't know. Other than that, I notice he carries two sword-like weapons, which could be interesting in combat, even if I don't think he's actually that strong. Like, BAAM's most likely going to whoop their asses and show them what Caliban sort of saw in him, but it'll be interesting just to see how they compare to Levy, at least. Moving on to the next chapter, there isn't a huge amount of content to cover, or at least the stuff I like to cover. Still, I have to talk about BAAM for a little bit. So BAAM. He actually used to be my favourite character in the series alongside Rachel and Yoo-Han Sung. I think what I loved about him was that unlike many Battle Shonen protagonists, BAAM felt genuinely kind, for better or worse. It's one of those traits that many authors try to portray but often fail to do so without evoking an artificial aftertaste. SU's depiction of BAAM always felt different to me though, and I think the reason is because BAAM's positive traits are not always highlighted in a positive manner. Other authors will sometimes make the recipient of the protagonist's feelings clearly in the wrong, making it obvious that they should listen to them. You know, like their positive personality traits are highlighted as the factor that breaks through the other character's swath of internal rubbish. Fantastic writers such as Oda employ this technique, and it's a perfectly fine approach. I don't want to belittle it, but I find that SAU tends to ground BAAM's innocence and optimism in more human-like complexities. For example, In Season 1, his quest to follow Rachel up the tower slowly transforms into a toxic obsession after she doesn't reciprocate his affection in the submerged fish arc. He simply can't fathom this betrayal because there's two sides to every relationship and he's only perceiving one. In that way, there's a sincerity to this betrayal that makes it hard to dislike him even when I knew he was behaving in a nonsensical manner. Not so anymore. I think the tipping point came in the last station arc when BAAM reverted back to his irrational self in his fight against Caliban. It's just annoying when a protagonist doesn't learn a little self-restraint after hundreds of chapters devoted to progressing this mentality. Now, that's not to say that I don't believe there hasn't been any progression in terms of his personality. In one of my chapter discussions, I actually go through the pretty clear but slow linear trend in his character with respect to his relationship with Rachel. But what's gotten to me is that BAAM isn't that little pure kid that we met in Season 1 anymore. I can't excuse his nonsense as a child's naivety and impulsivity. I don't expect him to become this fully matured adult capable of making informed, perfectly logical decisions all the time, but some maturity would be appreciated. Thankfully, this chapter already appears to be remedying that complaint. What kind of struck me about BAAM's interactions with this kid on Dog Shelter is the composure he demonstrated in every panel. His lackadaisical but confident attitude in dealing with a scared kid, avoiding a needless fight with the company intern, striking down assholes like the level 4 supervisor. Unlike his Viola appearance during Season 2 Part 1, his obvious strength seems to be matched by a sense of mental stability, strength, and maturity. It also helps a ton on a superficial level that he now has Kun's hairstyle, but yeah, I'm enjoying this new and improved BAAM way more than his Season 2 counterpart. And I gotta say, the little moment where he asks the intern super politely if he can take the escaping boy reminded me a lot of the cafeteria conversation between Endorsi and BAAM in Season 1, where he's brightly asking her to be friends, and she's just like trying to like push him off. Except this time he's nice because he's secure in his position, not insecure. I don't think SAU is trying to contrast these two moments like that, but I think it's a cool comparison to make at least. The other thing I'd like to touch upon is Hockney's surprising team up with BAAM. I really didn't expect his involvement here, so it was kinda awesome to see SAU keeping him relevant. It makes sense for him to accompany BAAM since YEON isn't available, so what's a good equivalent to a guide with future sight? Another person with future sight. Though BAAM notes it might be easier with YEON around, so it's obvious Hockney is more of a substitute than a fully fledged replacement. But anyways, I also noticed in the computer screen in front of him, there's a clear maze-like structure to Dog Shelter's levels. Not sure how many levels there are, nor if BAAM is working his way up or down, but it's going to be interesting to explore this labyrinth. Obviously this is not Bay Road yet, but it's one part of a larger saga hopefully, so I'm interested to see what other domains Baylord Yama rules over. Speaking of locations, I really like the design of YEON'S residence. The eerie green, brown, and yellow colour palette and the stone construction gives a pretty earthy vibe that matches the scenery really well. YEON himself is, I don't know how to put this, but he's super Korean looking. He's kind of similar to White in that they both have this atypical feminine appearance, and I think that's absolutely intentional considering the love hearts on his clothing. It's a really common thing for Korean otome to have this type of male character, but it's always attention drawing when they're included in a shonen series. I also appreciate that SAU kept his colour palette pretty consistent with the scenery, embodying that gold-green aesthetic. And if you noticed, yes, I'm only talking about his appearance so far, because hopefully in the next couple chapters we'll get more info on his personality and background. I guess right now, I can't make any conclusions about him yet, but I sort of get a vibe, like an untrustworthy vibe from him, but I'm not sure if that's just him being super friendly, or if some part of this interaction is influencing my perspective right now. Okay, so with that said, I think I've covered all I wanted to from these first couple chapters. As always, leaving a comment would be much appreciated since I make these videos for the discussions they can generate. You know, like, even if I don't have a particularly big audience, I'm hoping to build a community that values the same type of obscure world building and character info that I do. I think the main thing right now I need to focus on is consistency, not making too many promises, and uploading discussions about topics other than the most recent chapters. So I think the next random TOG video I'll create will be about why I think Ran isn't a good character from a progression standpoint. I know it's not going to be a super popular opinion, but I'm interested in debating this with folks. So yeah, see you next time for the next chapter discussion video, and then after that the Ran-centered video. Bye!